thanks for coming, everybody, and thanks, Martha, for having me down to speak tonight. We're a small crowd, but I know it's a nice day, and as Martha and I were saying, people are coming home from work and maybe want to work on the garden. I know I came down from Athens and drove through Appalachia from the northern end where we are, or not all the way north, but a northern end down here, and I watched spring kind of unfold. It was sort of like what's coming our way. I saw the red buds at one point. We don't have those up there yet where I live. Welcome. I'm here to talk about the greenhouse effect. It's renovating homes for deep energy efficiency. And you may or may not know who I am. I've done almost 200 episodes on HGTV and the DIY networks, the do-it-yourself networks on home building. Actually, I've done things on home building, on building instruments, because I have a classical piano degree. See, I was trained as a young person in construction arts by my father, and when I decided to go to college, I said, I'm not doing construction. I'm going to get a music degree. So I got my music degree, and then I got out into the world, and I found that my music degree set me up so that I would never unlearn my construction skills. It would keep my construction skills honed for a long time. I could always make a living in construction. It was a little harder to make a living in music. Wasn't playing Carnegie Hall. So I ended up on television for HGTV and the Do-It-Yourself Network. I still work for Scripps. I'm mostly online. They've moved a lot of their educational stuff, which is what I do, online, and all the reality stuff on TV. So you won't find me on reality shows. However, if you want to see me on TV, you can tune in to Real Rail Adventures. It's a new travel show on public television, on PBS, nationwide. It's produced by the same people who do Rick Steves and Rudy Maxa and Richard Bangs and those guys. And we travel all over the world, and we highlight public transportation, particularly rail, in travel. So Real Rail Adventures, you can see our first episode on Switzerland. It's playing now. We're headed back to Switzerland this summer, and South Africa, Norway. So we're trying, I think, maybe trying to get Americans to think a little more about public transportation. So what I'm here to talk about tonight is what's called a deep energy retrofit. And a deep energy retrofit is a renovation process. It's a whole home renovation process that by definition saves 50 to 90% of the energy in a home. And it's not just energy savings. It's not just putting dollars back in your pocket, but it's also making your home a more comfortable place to live and a healthier place to live. And that's really important. And that's on the micro level. That's what you get out of deep energy retrofitting your older home. I believe there are lots of benefits on the macro level as well. I believe that by retrofitting older homes that we can do things to help save our economy, our environment, and our energy security. I'll talk about all this tonight, but I'm going to start at the micro level, which is me. I've written a book about a publisher out of Vermont, and if you're interested in having a copy, I've got some here tonight. Otherwise, it's available wherever books are sold. And I'm going to start with a quote. This is from Carl Elefante. The greenest building is the one that's already built. And this is a lesson I kind of had to learn myself. I grew up, my father actually designed, after the energy crisis of the 70s, designed, and I helped him build as a teenager, a super insulated home that was passive solar, because he was sick and tired of the energy crisis of the 70s. So in the 80s, we built this beautiful new home out in the country. And so I always aspired to that. As a matter of fact, when I met my wife, I was living in Seattle. She and I had just read Walden together. We read it in high school, but we reread it in our 20s, and we were inspired to live a simple life in the country. So a few years pass, and we decide to move to this college town in Ohio, Athens, and buy a house in town. It was a place where we could afford land in the country. At that point, we had 2 small children. We thought, we'll buy the house in town. We'll fix it up a little bit. We'll meet people in town. We'll find land in the country. We'll have friends. We'll know the town, and then we'll move to the country, build our eco-friendly house. Our children will, be raised in the fields and the streams of the countryside. It'll be a beautiful life, right? So we also began making friends. We did that. We bought the house, we bought the land. We began to make friends both in town and in the country. And the one thing that struck me about the people in the country, I love them all, but they were doing a lot of driving. They were back and forth constantly from town, because if you live in the country and you work in town, as many of my professor friends do in a university town, then you're at least driving in for work every day. If you have kids, you're driving in for school. Well, then there's piano lessons, then there's the grocery store, there's dinner out once in a while, and all of a sudden you're on the road a lot. That just didn't sound as eco-friendly and green and as exciting as I had really pictured it. I had pictured kind of being in the country, not kind of commuting back and forth to the country. So as my wife and I began to think about it a little bit, we realized our little house in town, the one we were going to flip and sell and make a little money on, it's a great little house in a great location where we can walk our kids 3 blocks to the elementary school, 3 blocks the other direction to the local library. We're 12 to 15 minutes to the university, the uptown university area, where we can have Thai food or Indian food, or we can go to a sporting event or a cultural event, a show. Everything's so convenient. I'm a bike ride from the farmer's market. We started thinking that maybe that whole dream of living in the country was not quite what we thought it was. So we thought, we need to stay in this house because it's in a great location. The problem with that house was that it had the problems that 70-year-old homes have. My house was a kit home built in the early 1940s. Matter of fact, during the renovation, I came across a rafter where the carpenters had all signed their names in pencil and the date that they were there. So I kept that rafter. I still have it. That little chunk, I cut it out, kept it. But it has all the problems that older homes have. Single pane windows, rotting window frames. This is the back of the garage where somebody somewhere along the lines took the back load-bearing wall off the garage and added on, but neglected to support the roof. And so over time it sagged, and the whole back of the garage basically rotted off. You're looking at it's the back of the siding, essentially. All the inside of the wall had rotted out. So it had all kinds of problems that I knew about when I moved in, but I thought, we'll paint it, we'll make it look nice, and we'll flip it, and we'll make some money on it. The next guy can deal with it. Well, here I was the next guy, right? We're staying. And my wife said, if we're going to stay in this house, we got to fix it up. So I thought, well, I'll do the easy stuff, right? The weatherization stuff. I caulked, I changed out some light bulbs, I put on new door sweeps, and I saved 15%. I was very pleased with myself. I maybe spent $300, and I saved 15% on my energy bills. But then word came that our electric utility was going to raise rates over 3 years by 45%. And my 15% suddenly looked really piddly. And my bills were going to go straight back up again. This is a house that had gas bills in the winter that could approach $300, and it's 1,000 square feet. I mean, it was a sieve. So we weren't very happy with that. And besides the fact that our energy bills were high, in the summertime, it's hot and sweaty in the house. No matter how much you run the air conditioning, I still break a sweat. In the wintertime, it's cold, drafty, and dry in the house. No matter how much heat we pump into it, my wife still looks like the Michelin guy. She's head to toe with down and fleece and all winter long. To top it off, this was the basement. Now, anybody who has an older home knows what an older home smells like. It's a funky smell. It's a kind of a mushroom smell maybe. Where does that come from? In our case, we have no standing water in that basement. We have a sump pump, and that pumps up any water that might come into the basement before it can get into the space. But we have cold masonry walls. We have a house that's leaky as a sieve, letting in hot, humid air in the summer. That humid air reaches that cold surface or cool surface and condenses on the surface. Then that condensation, that liquid water, doesn't dry, and it is the host for mold and mildew and algae and all kinds of things. So we had the moldy smell, and then that open sump pit, well, from that we would get the swampy smell. So we had moldy and swampy, and to top it off, we have naturally occurring radon where I live, when many people do. You probably do here. And the levels in that basement were high enough that nobody should have been down there for very long. And what do we have this set up as? We have it set up as a play space, right? You see all the kids stuff? So kids, put on your lead suits and go down there and have a blast. I don't know how they get off the floor to make that jump shot for the little basketball hoop there. I don't know. So moldy, swampy, radioactive. We had issues with the home that went beyond the fact that it was expensive to heat and cool. It was uncomfortable to live in, and we also had indoor air quality problems. All of these things were going to need to be fixed if we were going to stay in that home. So back in my family lived through the energy crises of the 70s. My father got upset about that and decided he was going to build a home that would keep him independent from energy sources as much as possible. So he and my great-grandfather designed, and I helped build, a home that was super insulated, passive solar, had a geothermal heat pump. This is back in the early 1980s, so that was new technology back then for residential application. I went back and I remembered some of those things that I'd learned in building that house, and I thought, I wonder where that technology is today. Well, it turns out that super insulation became building science, because when they first super insulated homes, Many of those older homes, because the insulation they pumped in would trap moisture, they rotted out. And so we had what we thought was a big success. We're going to insulate these homes, and homes are going to be more efficient. Well, it didn't work very well to start with. And that spawned a whole industry called building science. Building science actually decided to look at how homes were built from the ground up, and also to look at retrofitting and remodeling homes and figure out the best way to do those things in all climates. And they come up with some good ideas. And one of those ideas is what's called a deep energy retrofit. That's not my idea, that's building science. But a lot of people haven't heard of it because building science, a lot of people haven't frankly heard of building science. So I found the deep energy retrofit whole house solution, and I decided this is the solution that could be right for my home. And in a deep energy retrofit, basically you attack everything to find all of the little bits of savings all over the place. You start with the building envelope, because that really is the most important thing. The building envelope is it's a fancy name for everything that keeps the outside out and the inside in. So the building envelope, it includes air sealing and insulating the walls and the roof. And it's not just insulation. Insulation is like a sweater that you wear outside on a cold day. You can be pretty comfortable with the sun shining and there's no wind. But as soon as the wind picks up, you're pretty cold because the wind will blow right through that sweater, that insulation. You also need to add air sealing, which is like putting on a windbreaker or a rain jacket over that insulation. Then you've got a whole insulation system. So air sealing and insulation of the windows and the roof, of the walls and the roof. It applies to windows and doors, but also part of your envelope is your basement or your crawl space. Many people don't think about that, but I'll talk a little more in depth about that in a minute. After you attack the envelope, then you move on to all the different systems, everything that does work in your home, your heating and air conditioning, water heater, lights, appliances, electronics, all of that's important. And you can milk efficiencies out of each system in your home until you achieve that 50 to 90%. After that, and only after you do this, matter of fact, this is kind of interesting, you can add renewables. This is solar and or wind power. I actually interviewed one of the CEOs of Solar City. It's a big corporate solar installer out west. I interviewed him for a TV program we did, and I was asking him off camera because I was interested in efficiency. I said, look, I don't want to mess you up, but I want to ask you on camera about energy efficiency, how you feel about that, because a lot of people just slap solar panels on their home and don't deal with the efficiency. And he said, oh, I'm with you. He said, at Solar City, we believe you can't have your dessert until you've eaten your vegetables. And by that I mean, you have to eat your vegetables in terms of getting the energy efficiency right on your home before you can have your dessert, the solar panels. So Solar City had decided every new system they installed either as a lease or as an installation that someone had bought outright, you would get this 23-point inspection and also retrofitting package that was worth a couple of $1,000s because they wanted to make sure your home was as efficient as possible before you started putting on the solar panels. So building envelope systems, and then finally at the end, renewables can make up most of the power that you use because you save so much. The results at our house, our electricity bills have dropped by over 90%. Actually, at this point, that was right after we finished. I would say now it's more like 95 to 97. We've made some other changes since the retrofit was complete. So our energy bills are minuscule now. Our natural gas use dropped by 70%. Which is my worst gas bill in the worst winter at the highest prices is between $50 and $80. 30 of that are just the fees they charge me to be hooked up. So I have minuscule gas bills. I barely pay anything for gas. I pay $30 a month most months for that fee. That's despite the fact that we actually tore off that leaky garage I told you about and replaced it, that leaky attached garage, and added 350 square feet of conditioned space. And we turn the thermostat up in the winter because, gosh darn it, there's no reason for my wife to walk around the house looking like the Michelin Man in the wintertime anymore because we have an energy efficient home. She can be comfortable. We're still saving that electricity and that gas even though we have added square footage and we have turned the thermostat up. So the home is more energy efficient. We've also become more comfortable, as I noted, and our home has become healthier. Now, I haven't addressed that quite yet specifically, but I will in a little bit. So the first step that we took in our retrofit story, and again with this I'm going to start at the micro level with my story and we'll move up to the macro stuff that I mentioned at the beginning. We had an energy audit, and not just any energy audit, not the audit that the electricity utility is happy to give you for free or for $50 or the gas utility, but a HERS rating. We had specifically a home energy rating systems rating or a BPI, a Building Performance Institute, that's bpi.org, or resnet.us is the HERS people. They'll come and for $300 to $400, they do a whole home energy audit where they actually track exactly what your home's made of and how much and how big and how many windows. And then they do what's called a blower door test here to check the pressure, how many leaks. Andrew Frohine from Save Green USA up in my neck of the woods did this for us. He found that through the blower door test and pressure testing that we had a hole in our house about that big. If you added up all the tiny gaps and cracks, that's about what was open to the outside year-round. Then he also did a duct blaster test to make sure that the ducts in my heating system and cooling system were sealed and functioning correctly. That's really important too, big loss of energy. And then he used this infrared camera to check out where heat loss was happening in the house. With all of that information, all of his computer modeling, he took all that information, went back to his office, and then generated this big report that I could then use to decide what to do first, how to design my deep energy retrofit. But even if you're not going to remodel, do a serious remodel, having a major audit like this done means that any time you have to replace, say, a water heater or an HVAC unit, you have a really good roadmap that will tell you. Or you think, oh, I think we need new windows. And yet your report may tell you, look, your windows are actually pretty good. What you really need to do is add insulation to your crawl space. So the detailed energy audit done by a professional is really important. Those auditor professionals can then put you in touch with professional certified trained contractors who know how to do some of these practices that I'll talk about in a minute. So we started with the energy audit, and then we attacked the building envelope. I'll start with a caveat. The way I did this is not necessarily the way that everybody should do this. In the book, I actually cover my deep energy retrofit, but along with retrofits all over the country. So if you live in Nevada, it's different than here, than Ohio, than Florida. Depending on where you live and what kind of climate you have and what your microclimate is around your house, you may retrofit your home differently. This is me on our roof applying spray foam insulation. I added 2x3 studs right over the old shingles, and then I spray between them with spray foam insulation. Spray foam insulation, if you're not familiar with it, goes on wet, expands to 6 times its size, and then cures hard and inert. It's a great insulator, R7 per inch if you're familiar with R ratings. It's also an air sealer. As it expands, and before it hardens, it expands into gaps and cracks that you can't see with the naked eye maybe, or you can't find. And therefore, you're getting an air seal at the same time you're getting an insulation. So it's almost like getting the windbreaker and the sweater all in one. So this is what we did to the roof. And then we put new sheathing on, new roof sheathing that was going to hold up the new shingles. That sheathing was special sheathing called radiant barrier sheathing. We used in particular LP Tech Shield. Radiant barrier sheathing in the summertime will block most of the radiant energy from the sun. So you're familiar with, there are 3 basic kinds of heat energy. There's radiant and there's, radiant is what we were trying to block. It keeps your attic cooler and can save up to 30% on your air conditioning bills. It's a really inexpensive way of saving energy on air conditioning. So we added the radiant barrier sheathing. And then we used, this is a recycled rubber faux slate roof from EcoStar, faux copper gutters, because we wanted our house to retain its sort of cottage feel. I did the same thing on the walls. This is me applying the spray foam. I'd never done this before, by the way. I have been a carpenter and contractor for a long time, but I've never applied spray foam, and I found these are do-it-yourself kits that are really easy to use. I did the same thing to the walls, and you can see how you can see this big gap here that actually goes into the attic. We sealed up our attic, and I talk about that in the book. This may not be for your home, but it works really well for mine. And that foam expanded into all the gaps and cracks. Then we added triple pane glass windows, which are super efficient. They're triple pane Krypton filled, and so I've always joked that if Superman was ever trying to break into my house, he would not be able to get in because of the Krypton. So we have that going for us. And the doors are a fiberglass shell that's filled with more of that spray foam insulation, along with the triple pane windows. The art glass is even triple pane. So we've got a nice look to our home. At the same time, it's extremely efficient. We've kept kind of the traditional styling of the front. This is my wife, Sherry. She does all the painting. After I had sided the place, we decided to side with this is actually a wood type of siding that's it's an engineered wood using small diameter, rapidly regenerating trees. This is an alternative to either regular wood siding, which is quite expensive and honestly has to be painted all the time. It's an alternative to fiber cement siding. Fiber cement siding, if you're not aware, is full of Portland cement, which is a very high energy product. 10% of our greenhouse gas emissions worldwide come from producing Portland cement. So it was important to me to find sort of an eco-friendly alternative. So this is a product called Smart Side from LP, rapidly regenerating, sustainably harvested, small diameter, rapidly regenerating trees that are stranded and then they're put into a mat and turned into a siding using a marine resin, and then it has a baked on finish, which Sherry painted. And I'm going to tell a brief story here. It's to get out of the technical stuff for a minute. The book is really the story of our retrofit, and I tell a lot of these stories in the book, but that blue color, when I put the book out, when I sent the book to the publisher, and they said, look, we have a lot of pictures of your house when it's finished, but what about some old pictures? You know, do you have some before pictures? And I said, well, the problem is before, it's all the same color. They said, well, why is that? Well, the story goes like this. My youngest daughter, Sylvie, we were out west visiting the grandparents. She was about 2. And it had been a long day. We'd been out on the Columbia River all day playing with the cousins and the aunts and uncles. And she was still in her bathing suit and covered with sand and a little sunburned. And it was probably 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, probably her bedtime. And she started to she was in my wife's arms. Just these big tears welled up in her eyes. She was exhausted. And my wife said, Sylvie, honey, what's wrong? She said, Mama, I don't know. I just want to go back to my little blue house. And so I thought, I thought a lot about that. When we came to retrofit the home, though we had lived with the blue for 10 years, and we thought, well, 8, 10 years, and we thought, well, it's a chance to change the color. So my wife and I were sitting around the table with a bunch of paint chips, had some greens out and some reds. It was our chance to make a different statement. And Sylvie walks into the room. Now she's 12, She said, what are you guys doing? I said, well, honey, we can, try to put a positive spin, right? Honey, we're going to be able to repaint the house, and it can be any color you want. And so what color are you going to paint it, Pop? And I said, I looked at my wife, and I realized, to her, the little blue house is home, right? So I said, we're going to paint it exactly the same color blue, which we did. So my wife is painting the house the same color blue. And then once we did the roof, right? We did the walls with the windows and doors and all the retrofitting. We moved on to the basement. And most people don't think of the basement. A friend of mine, though, Eric Kehr, and he owns a company called EcoStud. And now EcoStud, before you think it's a troupe of scantily clad, eco-friendly male dancers, does not. It's actually a recycled stud material, plastic stud material, that is used for retrofitting the interior of typically the interior of basements. Eric is from Calumet, Michigan, and he was a retrofitter, and he came up with this idea of a plastic stud because people often in the very cold regions want their basement retrofitted, or he convinces them with this story to retrofit their basement. And using wood in that situation is bad because wood actually will suck up moisture, it will encourage the growth of bacteria and mold and mildew. So using wood in the basement is not a good idea. So he came up with this great product. But he said, even in Calumet, where it's really cold, he has a hard time convincing people to retrofit their basements or their crawl spaces because, he said, heat rises. And he looked at me and I said, yeah, heat rises. I learned that in 3rd grade. He said, no, it doesn't. Hot air rises. Heat just moves from hot to cold. You should have learned that in 10th grade. That's the first law or second law of thermodynamics. And as I recalled, yes, indeed I did. I'd just forgotten it because for some reason, heat rises stuck in my brain. Well, so most of us think heat rises. So we insulate like crazy what they call our lid or our attic and our walls. But we never really think about the basement. So Eric tells people this story. It's about the guy with no pants. Bear with me. So you give a guy, it's 20 degrees outside on a cold winter day. You dig a hole in the yard, and you give your guy a really nice big thick down parka, some mittens, and a hat. It's what we do to our house, right? We put the insulation in the lid and the walls. You put them in the ground. You just drape a blanket around that hole so the cold air is not filtering down in there. And then Eric and I go back inside, and we have some hot chocolate, and we chat for a couple hours. And we come back outside, and like any good insulation salesman, we offer him what? A new hat, more hats and more parkas and gloves. But he doesn't want any of that. He's freezing his patootie off because 98 degrees Fahrenheit, basically the warmth in his body, has been through the second law of thermodynamics being wicked into the 45-degree soil, and he is cold. That's exactly what's happening in your basement. Once you insulate like crazy the lid and the walls, then the heat has to go someplace, and it goes to the coldest place it can find, which tends to be your basement, or in this case, this is an infrared shot of a home. You can see, there's the wall and the window. Looks pretty good. You don't see a whole lot of heat coming out of there. But then you look right there at the foundation. That's the top of the basement wall. and the heat is just pulsating out of there. That's because it's not insulated under there. It's not been retrofitted. So we retrofitted our basement. This is what we did. That's Sylvie. That's the little blue house girl. She loves to do, especially demolition. She thinks that's fun. So she helped me pull out all the junk that was in the basement from before. And I added Eric's Eco Stud to the inside of our masonry basement. And then I used more of that spray foam. And another quality of that spray foam, it expands. As it expands, it not only expands into gaps and cracks, but it also acts as an adhesive. So it'll hold tight to that wall. Once it expands and becomes my insulation and my air seal and everything, it's also a moisture seal. It will not allow any humid air that happens now to get into my home from the outside in the summer. It won't allow that humid air to contact the masonry surface and condense, and therefore I won't have the water issues in my basement that I've always had, the mold and mildew issues in my basement that I've always had. So I use more spray foam there, and right up across that sill plate and where you saw the heat coming out of that other house, we spray foam that. So we took this basement space, and we were able to finish it, the old play space, into what is now our music room and a guest space, a really cozy place. I actually capped the sump pump so there's no swampy smell. The spray foam helped keep us from having the moldy smell, and all of that together along with our ventilation system helps keep our radon levels to a very minimum, so we no longer have the moldy, swampy, radioactive basement that we used to have. It's now our sort of recording studio and guest room. So that was our shell. Our building envelope is now complete. But it was time then to think about all the systems. And I didn't do this all at once when I retrofitted. We did this over about a 5-year period. As things failed, we replaced them with really efficient models. But where does your money go and what are your systems? Your systems are any place that electricity or gas or energy is doing work in your home. So for heating and air conditioning and lighting and appliances, all of that. Starting with our HVAC, we went with high efficiency, 90 AFU, 16 SEER. Now this is back a few years. You can do a lot better than that now. A 90% efficient gas furnace and a 16 SEER AC do a lot better than that now. And you can choose things like geothermal is now quite reasonable if you have the right kind of siting. Also, we right-sized the HVAC unit. It's neither too big nor too small. And that's really important because an HVAC that's too big, you know, the guy comes in and goes, yeah, you probably need about a 2-ton, but let's go 2.5 just to be safe. That's the wrong way to size an HVAC system. The detailed home energy audit is a good place to start to right-size your HVAC, but any contractor should do what they call a manual J calculation, which will actually do a lot of those home energy audit calculations over to make sure that they right-size your system. System that's too small won't be able to keep you hot, warm, or cool. The right-size system will run like a car on a freeway at 55. It runs at a low level all the time, very efficiently, breaks down less often, makes you much more comfortable. We made sure our ductwork was sealed with no obstructions. We also put on a programmable thermostat, and we programmed it. A lot of people buy those programmable thermostats, they stick them in, and then they neglect to do the part of it that really counts, the programming. So make sure you program your programmable thermostat. They can save you money. We also added, we bought a slightly more expensive HVAC unit that had humidity controls because we were told that if we could keep enough humidity in the house in the wintertime, we could keep the heat a little bit lower. Our bodies would feel more comfortable at a lower temperature with a higher humidity because often our homes get very dry in the wintertime. The air outside is dry, it's leaking in your gas furnace or your heat, that's drying the air out. So we have humidity controls that allow us to keep our humidity very even. In the summertime, that's especially true. If you can keep your humidity down into like below 50%, your air conditioning, you don't have to cool the house nearly as much. We can keep our house very comfortable at 78 or 80 because the humidity is lower. So you save a lot of money, a lot of energy that way. And our equipment will last longer because it will run more evenly that way over time because of that humidity control. We also don't get the condensation and therefore not the mildew. If you notice condensation on your windows in the wintertime, sometimes that will drain down onto the frames, wet the wood, and then you get mold and mildew on that wood. That's why usually you have mold and mildew on your frames. So we have none of that. And we have a lot of wood furniture and a lot of instruments. We're all musicians in my family. And all of that stuff is much happier because we keep the relative humidity between 40 and 50% all the time, all year round. So we know that HVAC is heating and cooling, AC, right? Most people ignore the V, the ventilation. But in our house, after we'd sealed up every gap and crack that let air in, and often people say, well, yeah, if I seal my house up, then where's the fresh air come from? Well, that air was never fresh, believe me. That air is called infiltration, and it comes through a dirty old wall, often half moldy insulation before it gets into your house. It's not fresh. So even an older house can experience better air quality by using mechanical ventilation. The mechanical ventilation we chose is called an energy recovery ventilator. But you can see the things that can build up in a home through this graphic. If you have an attached garage, car exhaust, cooking, household cleaners, paints, stuff from your cabinets, new furniture, carpets, outdoor, not so much from windows being open, but from being tracked in off of lawns, mold and mildew, radon from the basement, all that stuff can build up in your home to really harmful levels. So we use what's called an energy recovery ventilator. How does an energy recovery ventilator work? Well, it has two fans that constantly bring in fresh air from outside and expel old, dirty air from inside. But it passes both streams of air through this wheel that retains whatever energy, whether it's heating or cooling energy, in our case 95% through this Ultimate Air Recuperator. 95% of the energy that's in the air is kept in the house while the air is actually exchanged. So it's a really cool little unit that keeps 95% of the money that I've paid to heat or cool my home in the house while keeping the air fresh. Dilution actually, in this case, is one solution to pollution. So diluting all of those and getting rid of, exhausting all of that indoor air, bad air buildup is the way to take care of that. I have to say, just sort of a personal note, the first night that I woke up with the ERV running in the house, I always wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, have to get a glass of water, whatever, wake up, I hear a noise. It was always stuffy in the house. The very first night, it felt to me like there was a window open in the house. Not that it was cold, it was just fresh air. The building was acting like a 21st century office building. I mean, it felt like fresh air all the time, not like a 20th century, early 20th century home. So it definitely works. And my family gets sick a lot less now, I notice. That may be anecdotal, but in our case, I think it's our sealing the house up and the ERV working. On water heating, we used a tankless water heater, which just heats water as we need it. You turn a hot water tap on, and it's a gas water heater. It kicks on, and within a few seconds, you've got hot water at the tap. So you're not wasting energy on a big tank trying to keep water stored all the time. As far as electric goes, they now have air source heat pump electric water heaters that have Energy Star ratings. Electric water heaters generally don't have an Energy Star rating because they're very inefficient. But the new air source heat pump water heaters are. They pull heat from the air around them, and they heat the water that way. Solar can work in some places, although I was told in my neck of the woods we have too many cloudy days, that solar water heating, I'd be better off putting my money into photovoltaic panels and attaching them to an electric water heater, that it would be cheaper to do it and greener to do it that way. One of the interesting options that people have now, if you have a geothermal system, now a geothermal heat pump system, so an air source heat pump gathers heat from the air and in the winter and pumps, it basically condenses it and pumps it into your house to keep your house warm. Even when the air is fairly cold, there's still plenty of heat that can condense. In the summertime, it takes the heat out of your house the same way. It sucks the heat out of your house and just blows it off into the atmosphere. That's why you have those big fans outside. Geothermal, on the other hand, will take heat from the ground or dump heat to the ground. In the summertime, that what we would call waste heat from pulling it out of your house, and they're going to dump it into the ground or blow it out to the, with an air source heat pump out to the universe, that heat can be run through your water heater first, and you can heat your water that way. So anytime you run your air conditioning, your domestic hot water is free because it's using waste heat to heat the water. And then the rest of the year, this is the most efficient way, more efficient than air source heat pumps, to heat your water using electricity. On lighting, this is not all that new, but when we started our process, LEDs were a big deal. Good LEDs were a big deal. Now you can walk into any of the home centers and pick up really high quality, especially LEDs, especially can retrofits. So recessed lighting retrofits, a lot of recessed lighting like you see here in homes, very inefficient because A, they'll use a big incandescent bulb, which burns a lot of energy, but then the housing is typically very leaky. So that incandescent bulb heats up, gets very hot, heats the air around it, and then via convection pulls the conditioned air from your house in a chimney effect up through that housing and usually into your attic and then to the outdoors. So those housings are inefficient, the lighting is inefficient. These retrofits pop in, anybody can do it. I'm not particularly an electrician or anything, but I was able to buy them and stick them in myself. They'll retrofit into your old housings, and it incorporates a seal around the rim right here, that when you pop it up against the ceiling, it seals that air loss out. So there's a double energy efficiency there. But we used LED lighting. That's a great replacement now for fluorescents. And as your fluorescents go, I highly recommend investing in the LEDs. They're very warm now. They have high what they call CRI, color rendering index, so the light is very pleasing if you buy a warm 2700K light. This is actually the addition that we put on the upstairs of our garage. You can see the LED lights in the ceiling there in the kitchenette. After we did our lighting, we talked about appliances and electronics. Basically, we bought Energy Star and beyond when we could. Fewer, smaller appliances. My mom has 2 refrigerators and a freezer. And I said, Mom, you live by yourself. We come a few times a year. Why do you? She's like, well, you might come and we might need food. I may need to feed you. I said, but Kroger's 2 miles away. We'll bring food. You don't have to. But, it's a classic case of thinking we need all of these extra appliances. We really don't. And think about vampire loads. Vampire loads are those things that are, especially the little blocks that you have that plug in, like for your phone or maybe for your laptop computer, that when your computer or your phone is unplugged, they're still sucking a little bit of power. Now, newer appliances, they passed a lot of legislation to stop vampire loads or make them much, much smaller. So anything newer, TVs, computers, anything that you buy from 2013 on, they actually suck very little power when they're not plugged in. After that, I say you can look into energy monitoring and automation. I use a kilowatt meter, and this is a little meter that plugs into the wall, and then you plug your appliance into it to check what an appliance is costing me. I can program this thing to say, okay, I pay 14 cents a kilowatt hour, and I'll put it on my little tiny chest freezer where I put game meat in the wintertime. Is this worth it? Do I need to have this extra freezer? I find out how much it costs. Is it worth it for me to keep that extra appliance around? This is a high-end home energy monitoring that is sold by Crestron. Some people love this, where they can look at everything they're using at any time and adjust. Hey, it's not for me, but some people it helps them. And as far as automation goes, I was going to say with energy monitoring, you're just finding out how much you're using, and that helps you change your habits. There was a university, I believe it was Oxford, that did a study. You can save up to 15% on your energy bills just by changing your habits. That's for monitoring. For automation, that's getting appliances and things to do things on there you don't have to remember to. There are high-end monitoring systems like from Crestron that will control your whole house. That's getting cheaper and cheaper. It's not personally for me yet. Maybe it'll get cheap enough and work well enough that I'll want it. But at this point, I say use common sense automation, which means putting kitchen and bath exhaust fans, which everybody should have to get rid of humidity and stale air, put those on timers. Because when I jump into the shower, I put my timer on 20 minutes. When I'm done with my shower in 2 and I leave the bathroom, I don't have to remember to go back and shut that fan off later, and I don't waste energy that way. I also use dawn to dusk and motion sensor lighting on my LED lights outside. So those lights only come on when there's something there and when it's dark out, not in the middle of the day. And then I use a programmable thermostat, and I program it. They say that if you can program your thermostat to go down in the wintertime by 8 to 10 degrees for 8 to 10 hours, you can save up to 10% on your energy bills. So when you go to bed, hey, I'll drop it 10 degrees, that's fine. I'm under the covers anyway. When I go to work, 10 degrees, and I'm back in 8 hours. So there's energy savings if you use a programmable thermostat, and you never have to be in a house that's not warm. You can tell that programmable thermostat, have it warm by the time I get up, or have it warm by the time I get home, and it'll do that. To me, that's common sense automation. After that, I like to talk about additions because any home renovation process, when you're thinking about doing a deep energy retrofit, it's usually spurred on by, well, we need to put an addition on. We need to make a major change to the house. So we tore off that old garage I told you about with that rotted back wall. This was the office that was above the garage. It wasn't really an office, it was a storage space. But my wife and I shoehorned 2 desks in there, and we would work in there together. We both work from home. And I was in danger of becoming her, I don't know if you watch The Office, but Dwight Schrute, he's like the annoying office mate. I was in danger of really becoming the most annoying office mate for her. So it was time to get rid of this and put on something that we could use. We actually ended up, well, I'll tell you the story in a minute. So all I could do was tear that sucker off of there and start over. We ended up doing 2x6 walls with what they call a foam and bat. We used more of that spray foam, but spray foam's rather expensive, so we used spray foam and some fiberglass to get R30 walls. R30 is very high, and R60 roof, cathedral ceiling. We used local tile in the bathroom. This is recycled glass countertops. There's my bath fan timer up there, triple pane windows. Low flow fixtures. We used local cherry for the flooring, more handmade tile that's local to Ohio, more recycled glass countertops, our LED lights, and our triple pane windows, LEDs here as well. And one more view of that. And this is, I like to point this out because this right here is a recycled bottle window, and that's made by someone I know really well. That's my wife, Sherry. She has artwork she does. She calls herself Blue Moon Bottles, but she took old discarded bottles and cut them and made them into glass block, and that is a little window that's between the shower and the outside. It's opaque, you can't see into the shower, but it adds a little bit of light, and it's a really interesting sort of I don't know, nod to eco-friendliness in our house, and ties my wife into the whole business there. So after we did all of this, we did our high efficiency addition, and we did our retrofit of our main home. That's when we added a 4 kilowatt solar array. And we actually built the back shed roof up a little bit. Our south is that direction, so straight that way. We built the back roof up so that we would get a south face for our retrofit. You can't see the solar panels from the street. I'm not trying to be flashy with them. The front of the house has a nice traditional look. And in my case, I used a lot of incentives, and I found, as far as being able to pay for the system, I used grants, tax credits. I sell what's called the solar renewable energy credits, which allow electric utilities to say, Jeff is one of our producers of clean energy, and he's offsetting what would be coal power, and that goes toward our 12.5% we have to produce by 2025, that portfolio standard. And so I get a payment of about $1,000 a year through my SRECs. Basically, what was a $32,000 system, because I used incentives, got it down to about $9,000 out of pocket. I didn't expect to be able to sell the renewable energy credits after the first 5 years. We were expecting those to be phased out. As it turns out, they need more and more of those, so I'm actually getting paid a little more. I'm going to get $6,000 over the next 5 years, making the total system cost out of pocket $3,000, of which that was paid back in the first 3 years. I'm making about $1,000 worth of electricity a year. So my system is now, it's already in the black after 5 years of owning it. But I use DSIRE.org. It's the database of state incentives for renewables and efficiency. You just go here and you click on your state, and it'll tell you what's current as of this week, what's available to you in terms of low interest loans or for whatever your grants, tax credits. I know that the solar tax credit for the federal at the federal level is only good through the end of next year if they don't renew it. So through 2016, there's a 30% federal tax credit. So if you want to take advantage of that, it seems like time may be running out. So that's my family in front of our deep energy retrofitted 1940s Cape Cod style home. And we're pretty happy, we're comfortable, we've saved money on energy. But people ask me, was it worth it? And the only way I can respond to that is, well, it cost me 20 to 25% extra. See, when I went to design this thing, my wife said, look, we can retrofit the home the way you like, but it has to make sense. And she was the one sort of reining me in. So I did 2 bids on the thing. I said, it's going to cost us X dollars to retrofit it with standard materials, double pane windows, the standard way that I would retrofit a home. Just a new roof, some new siding where we need it. It's going to cost us 20 to 25% more to deep energy retrofit the house. And she said, well, that seems okay. What's the payback on that? And it was off-the-shelf stuff. This is not this is not high technology. Aside from the spray foam, which is actually pretty common now, it's all off the shelf. You can buy it at your local home center. The payback's 12 to 15 years. So the amount of energy that we're saving and the amount I paid extra to retrofit my home will pay itself back within a 12 to 15 year period. Sooner if energy prices spike, maybe it's 12 if energy prices get more expensive, 15 if they go down, but 12 to 15 years. I have to ask though, all the people, that's the first question I get about retrofitting, and it's a big question in the building science community. Does it pay itself back? When does it pay itself back? Does it? Can it pay itself back? This is the only thing that people are so adamant about paying itself back. You buy a new in-ground pool, granite countertops, an HD TV. Nobody says, well, is that HD TV going to pay itself back? No, this actually does have a payback time. And I would say it's not just the monetary payback in 12 to 15 years. There are other payback times that are intangible, and actually maybe kind of tangible, but they're hard to calculate. The indoor air quality, we haven't been sick. I haven't lost a day of work from being sick in the last 5 years. My kids have not lost a day of school for being sick in the last 5 years. There's got to be some benefit to that. Certainly not being sick helps. Long term, probably less asthma, probably less cancer, because we're not breathing all that stuff. There's certainly something to that. There are all kinds of other intangibles. Our comfort, what's that worth? We're getting a lot out of this that doesn't really compute in terms of dollars and cents. And I just want people to acknowledge that. But wait, there's more. Like I said, we get comfort, we get better indoor air quality. And I argue that we were helping to fix problems, broader problems in the economy, the environment, and energy security. And I'll touch on these things now. First of all, in the economy, wasted energy is just money down the drain. I mean, where's that going? It's going into someone else's pocket, and you can't spend it on something else. Deep energy retrofits can provide green jobs, and I'll point out how in a minute. Plus, there are so many of those hidden costs, what we call those the hidden costs and subsidies of fossil fuels that we don't put into the equation, that are not in our electric bills. These are what economists call externalities that we don't equate with our energy bills, but we pay for in our taxes to clean up the environment through Superfund sites. We pay for it in our health care bills to treat health problems from mining, from fracking, and all that. And this was the thing that got me to write the book, because I ran across this graph, and I know this is the boring part, but as a sort of geeky energy home guy, I got really excited about this chart because it explained to me where all those externalities are, right? All those things that we're paying for in our taxes and our healthcare bills and other ways. Because this is what it costs to create a QBTU, a quadrillion British thermal units. All you need to know about a QBTU is it's just a big unit of energy. It's a big honking unit. I mean, it's big. We use 80 to 100 QBTUs of energy. Sometimes I call them quads. That's easier for me to say. We use 80 to 100 quads per year of energy for all things in this country. So for our homes, for our transportation, for industry, everything. 80 to 100. To create one new QBTU of energy, one new annual QBTU that's output into the future, it costs $256 billion to do that with nuclear plants. It costs $122 billion using standard coal. Now, I'm not talking about clean coal, which that's a debate in and of itself, but I'm talking about a standard sort of relatively cleaner coal that they could build, a plant they could build today. $122 billion. From building energy reductions, it costs $42.1 billion using off-the-shelf technology. This is the retrofitting that I'm talking about on not only residents, but also on businesses as well. It costs, a third than it does coal, and 1/6 of what it costs to create that energy from nuclear. Amory Lovins calls this negawatts, right? Not megawatts, but negawatts. And the opportunity in the housing or in the building sector, people often think it's transportation. That's where all our energy is going, it's transportation. It's true, 28% of the energy we use in this country is for transportation, 23% for industry, but look at that, almost half is in our buildings. That's building our buildings, maintaining our buildings, heating and cooling our buildings. Half. If we could reduce, we could use deep energy retrofits to reduce our energy use in buildings. The opportunity is enormous. And then you think about this. There are 130 million homes right now in America. This is according to the 2011 census, right? Really, the housing report from the census. This is fascinating stuff, I know. But 130 million homes in America heated and cooled for year-round use. 80 million of those were built before 1980. And that just means they were built before the energy crisis in the 70s and built before we started to think about energy efficiency in our homes. When we started to think about that in the 80s, I would even argue that the next 20 years was kind of a wash. So there are probably a lot more than 80 million homes that need to be retrofitted. And you think about the fact that during the boom years of construction before the economic meltdown, there were 2 million homes, roughly 1.7 to 2 million homes per year that were being built. And it was like 1.3 to 1.5 million construction workers, I believe. That dropped to like 600,000 after the recession. It's up a bit now, but not that high. If we took that 80 million homes that we need to retrofit that are really energy inefficient, and we did 2 million of those a year, we retrofitted 2 million a year, that's 40 years of really good construction jobs. And I would argue, we're creating construction jobs, but we're also fixing a bunch of problems of our economic, environmental, and energy security problems. It's the cheapest way out. So I talked a little bit about those externalities, those hidden costs of coals. What are those? Well, there's a Harvard Medical School study by Paul Epstein called The Full Cost Accounting for the Life Cycle of Coal. And they took all those externalities and they began to add them up. And it's a difficult process, it's a difficult calculation, but they came up with a round number that coal's hidden costs are about $345 billion a year. What does that mean? It's from environmental damage that we haven't mitigated, so these are things we have to clean up because we mine or we burn coal. It's from the healthcare costs, not just miners, but people in the areas where there are coal burning plants have higher incidences of cancer, lung disease, all kinds of things. Plus lost tourism from things like mountaintop removal and fracking and mining and all that. What it means in real terms is the solution is an externalities tax, right? If we're going to spend money to clean all these things up and actually make coal pay for itself, we need an externalities tax. We need to take money from our energy bills, and we need to fix those problems. We need to subsidize people's health care bills. We need to, because coal is causing this particular problem. How much is that going to be? Well, on the conservative end, the study said it would be 9 cents a kilowatt hour. On the other end, 27 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, what do these numbers mean? I would say let's just take the conservative number. Take 9 cents a kilowatt hour and add it to the 14 cents a kilowatt hour I pay now. That's 23 cents a kilowatt hour. Conveniently, that is the break-even cost for solar. So that means to me, if it was even a penny more than 9 cents to fix all those problems, coal is more expensive than solar. We're paying for it. We're just not paying for it in our electric bills. That's all. And these all apply to fracking. This morning, it's a big deal in our area, and this morning there was another story of a spill. The way they found out about the spill, nobody said, hey, there was a spill. They found dead animals all around a big lake that was covered with the film. So the guys that spilled it, they left. And I have to say, with the environment, that's the thing. This is such an easy case with the environment. There's general pollution from doing this stuff. Mining, extraction, we all know about this. Mountaintop removal, the fracking issues, the spills, the meltdown, the transportation of all that stuff. All of that's happening. But the only positive I can get out of that is my younger daughter, Sylvie, has great stuff for science fair. She's been studying acid mine drainage from coal mines that were closed 100 years ago. And we are still paying for that energy that our ancestors burnt. So it's not just the cost that we're paying now, it's the cost we're passing on to our kids. She's done some great projects, and she's going to state science fair, but oh, and wildlife, the Audubon example. We were talking about windmills earlier and maybe how ugly they are. I kind of agree in one sense. The wildlife issues with energy, because any kind of energy we use, all energy has an effect on the environment. Solar has an effect. We have to mine the silica, right? We have to mine the metals. We have to manufacture the solar panels. Everything has an environmental effect, even windmills. And the idea, though, of wildlife strikes or bird strikes with windmills is interesting, because when the Audubon Society was asked about windmills and bird strikes, they said, what do you prefer? You know, coal power, wind power? Are you against wind power? They said, no, we prefer wind power. Of the hundreds of bird strikes that there are a year, that's regrettable, but the millions of birds that die from the burning of fossil fuels, that we don't like. So if you ask the Audubon Society, they're behind wind power. So I guess what we need to do is to choose the energy that's the cheapest, that also is the cheapest in terms of externalities. And that starts with energy efficiency and then moves on to renewables. If we ask everybody to pony up their share. And the cost for energy security is also, we think of it as primarily oil, right? The Straits of Hormuz, I heard again this on the radio right after that fracking spill story. There was the story of Iran sending battleships into the Gulf of Aden because their rebels, the Iranian-backed Yemeni rebels who are fighting the Yemeni government, Iran's just going to sidle over there and help their buddies out. In the meantime, they're going to disrupt the oil that's coming out of the Middle East, and we may see a little price spike. Not because energy is actually more expensive, but because people perceive that there's going to be a problem. Every time Iran gets upset, something happens, and it's the energy prices, right? We actually spend depending on the year, $40 to $70 billion of taxpayer money just to patrol out there, just to send our battleships through the Straits of Hormuz. Plus, we're asking people, it's not only economic, we're asking young people to do this stuff. And I would say, do we really want to ask our young soldiers to go out there and do this so that we can have cheap energy? I don't feel like I want to ask my 17-year-old daughter if she chose to go into the service in a year to go do something because I was being wasteful. The solution there, energy is interchangeable now. We were talking a little bit about Priuses that might be plugged in, and we might be able to run our homes on the batteries if there was a power outage. And energy now, we can use kilowatts and BTUs. We can use kilowatts to drive our electric or hybrid cars. Some of the kilowatts that we save and energy that we save in our homes, we can put into our vehicles in electrified transportation. And that can mitigate some of those effects on, as far as our tax money for energy security, and also the human costs. Deep energy retrofit electrons saved means less oil import. A lot of people say to me, this is too political. Well, these are two guys that are near and dear to me. That's my dad in the blue and my great-grandfather Murray in the yellow. My dad, he's the one that designed that house I told you about. He was a civil engineer. So was Murray. Murray was a civil engineer. Murray's my great-grandfather on my mother's side. Anyway, my dad's civil engineer, Murray's a civil engineer. My dad needed someone who could do the drawings because he was not an architect, not a draftsman, but my great-grandfather was. They designed this house together. This is the house that this is back, obviously some old videotape from the 1980s. Traditional looking home that was super insulated, used passive solar on the south side, an overhang that kept the sun out in the summertime but let it in the wintertime, and then that geothermal heat pump. It was all pretty, revolutionary back in the 1980s. But those two guys, my dad happened to be a Reagan Republican, NRA card carrying, pry my guns from my cold dead fingers kind of person. He wanted to build this home so he could be independent, right? He wanted to save his family. He wanted to be away from everyone. He wanted to be on his own. My great-grandfather actually lived through the Depression and lost everything. His idea, he became a progressive. His idea was that he needed to democratize energy. So his whole life he worked toward schemes that would try and make it easy for every man to keep his family warm. I remember a story of him. He was experimenting with the newfangled plastic milk jugs because A, there were too many of them, and B, he could use those to build what's called the Trombe wall, where he would collect heat in the milk jugs in a big cabinet, and then he'd blow air through there in the wintertime at night, and in Florida where he lived, and he could heat his house that way. Until they froze one night, and he had to go out there and empty them all. My mom's on the phone with my great-grandma. What's he out there? What's Murray out there doing? So we had this guy who was a right-wing, Reagan Republican NRA guy, and we had this progressive guy who actually, worked for civil rights in the 60s and was very progressive, an everyman sort of guy. And they came together on the designing of this house, and they agreed on the technology and all the energy efficiency that went into making that house what it was. To me, that's a microcosm of our country right now. That's one thing we should be able to agree on. Maybe you don't agree on, on the eco-friendly stuff. You're a right wing. You want to save the economy and energy security. Okay, you're left wing. You want to save the environment and you want to save the economy. That's pick 2 out of 3. That's what I say. I mean, I'm a pragmatist. I like the fact that we can fix all 3, and so I think that attacking our energy efficiency at home is a kind of patriotism. It's an economic patriotism because of what it can do in the economy. It's an environmental patriotism, and it's an energy security patriotism. Now, I admit, in my case, it's one family. But as we were retrofitting and before I wrote the book, neighbors came by all the time to stand there and watch me work. They never picked up a hammer, but they talked a lot, from the ground. And they wanted to know what I was doing. Some of them got really interested. They got interested enough to do it at their house. And this is going to start to look like a shampoo commercial from the 70s. I apologize. And then they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends. And the book helps tell people, and you're here tonight looking at it. And soon we really have a major effect on the world. And that's what I call the greenhouse effect. Thanks. But anybody have a question off the top of their head? Anything that I could clarify?
How long ago did you do this?
We finished. Well, see, this is when we say we finished. Last week, my wife finally goaded me into finishing up some of the shelves in our office. So, when did we start? I actually started the design of this in 2007, and we started work on it in the fall of 2009. We finished major operations by the fall of 2010, and then I think I had it sided the spring of 2011. So the basement retrofit was 2011. So I would say finished about 2012, which is when I started working on the book. And the book was published in 2013, so it was late in the summer 2013. So it's been kind of a process, but we did have to design something that fit our house, and there was not a lot of literature about that. I had to gather that literature from a lot of different sources. And then we wanted to put people to work, but we also wanted to do some of it ourselves. So we put a group of contractors to work for about 6 weeks to do the major stuff, and then my wife and I have done everything else. So.
Is there anything that hasn't worked out?
Yeah, actually, I think that spray foam with the studs, I like that idea because I knew that I could control. I wouldn't have to worry about where all the cracks and gaps were. I could spray the foam in and it would take care of that. Those studs actually it does what's called a thermal bridge. So you don't think of wood as being a great conductor of heat, but actually it's a lot better conductor than, say, fiberglass or spray foam. And so any place where there's contact from your plaster wall to a wood stud, in our case to wood sheathing, to wood siding, and to a wood stud, and there are little contacts, there, the stud hits that siding, you're wicking some heat through that massive, now I have 10-inch walls, you're wicking some heat out that way. I think I would have done better to have used 4 inches of foam board on the outside and very carefully sealed all the edges of those foam boards. That's one of the ways, in the book, I actually talk about that method because I ran across that a little later. And that's what I told my neighbor, Jeff Buckley, who's a geography professor in Athens. He just resided his house with the same siding I used. And he said, should I put something on? I'm like, yeah, you should. It's going to be 75 years before somebody else touches it, at the earliest, before somebody touches that siding again. You got to get at least 1 inch of foam on the outside. And they've noticed a huge improvement in their home. They've just completed that project. So yeah, I would have done that differently. Anything else that I would have done differently? Yeah, I would have made a lot more money before I started and paid somebody to do all the work. No, I learned a lot, and I actually really enjoy that. I enjoy the skills that I learn on a project. I am a carpenter. I've done a lot of electrical work and plumbing, and I know how to masonry. I've done that stuff over the years. I'm self-taught, so I really do enjoy that. And I had some frustrating moments. One of them I tell in the book. There's a story about how I was laying in bed one February morning, and I heard this drip, 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 and I thought, what is that? Like some snow melt on the windowsill outside, and I tried to find out where that drip was. Man, I walked all over the rooms, and I was, in my bedroom, couldn't find it. I wonder if there's a leak upstairs. It's just not come through yet, So I go into the attic, and there indeed is a leak. And I think, well, how can there be a leak in the roof? You have this high-tech roofing. What's going on? The way I had designed the retrofit of the roof, I designed it so I could do all of the insulation and spray foam and everything above before I put the sheathing on, right? So on the back shed roof, where if I'd wanted to insulate from the inside, I would have been in a tiny little crawl space, and I'm by nature a lot claustrophobic. I decided, no, I'm just going to do this all from above. I rigged up a way so I could put paper in, and then fiberglass insulation and spray foam above that. Well, it left this gap between the sheathing and the spray foam that wasn't perfectly sealed, and condensation had formed. And it formed this little river that was running down the spray foam and into my attic. All it was condensation. It was not a leak, just condensation. So as a result, I had to go back up there anyway to fix it and cut a little narrow strip down the middle of each of those things and spray foam all the way against the sheathing. It fixed the problem. But it was something that I designed. I ran past a couple people, but never really ran past a building science guy who would have said, you could have some condensation here, and I would have done it differently. So that's what I say all over the book. Whatever you're going to do, please consult a building science professional. And I give there are lots of places where you can find those people nationwide. I give lots of links to that stuff. And lots of extra information in the back. I try to keep as much of the technical information in sidebars and keep the story going in the middle with some of the challenges that we faced and some of the basic information, and then the more technical information in sidebars. And if you really want to get technical, you can go to the back and find lots of technical books and links online and forums and places like that. So anyway, so thanks for coming tonight, taking time out of your Tuesday night, or Wednesday night, right? Thanks.
You are watching VRCC TV, the education channel.